are starting a new series today, and I'm super excited and thrilled by some of you guys might recognize this guy named Jim Elliot. He moved to Ecuador. When he moved to Ecuador, he went there to reach the indigenous people, the Wantani tribesmen. And he went there and he was so excited about what God was doing in his life. He decided this was a violent people group to anybody outside of this tribe. And so he decides to go and minister and show the love of Christ to this tribe. And Jim Elliot's parents wrote him a note as he was leaving to go onto the mission field. And this note expressed their broken heart for his departure, because they were sad that they were going to lose connection and relationship. There was no cell phones back then. It was quite difficult to talk to somebody. And so they were expressing their broken heart for leaving for Ecuador. And even though they raised Jim to take risks and faith and step out in courage, even though they encouraged him to walk courageously and passionately and faithfully with Jesus, they were obviously concerned for his safety and his well-being as he went to this tribe, considering that they were a dangerous people group. So as soon as Jim received this letter from his parents, he sat down and wrote a response. And I want to read you part of that response today. Jim wrote to his parents saying this: "I know you were saddened of my going to South America. This is nothing else than what the Lord Jesus warned us of when he told the disciples that they must become so infatuated with the kingdom and following him that all other allegiances must become as though they were not." Wow. All other allegiances become as though they were not. A short time after Jim wrote this, he was killed by the Wandani tribesmen that he went to go minister to. They threw a spear, and there's actually a movie called The End of the Spear. I want to encourage you to watch it. It's about Jim Elliot's life. And he was 28 years old. 28 years old. Killed by the same people he went to serve. And not long before he actually died, he wrote something in his journal that has always stuck with me, and I want to read it to you. He said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." And it's almost like this prophetic statement of what he's talking about there is he's no fool who gives up what he cannot keep, his own life. And I'm sure when Jim wrote this was talking about his family, to gain what he cannot lose, this eternal reward, God just blessing him and him obeying and stepping into his mission in the world today. So I have a question for you. I've always been just a fan of Jim and what he did and his courage. And all the books that have been written about him and the movies that I've read or watched. But my question is, where did this incredible courage, faith, and passion for Jesus come from in Jim's life? Where did it come from? How was his infatuation with the kingdom of God so profoundly passed down to him that he would say all other allegiances were as none? This is an important question for me because I want to raise my own kids with Jim's kind of courage and faith. With that kind of faith that's willing to step out of the boat and willing to go and follow God wherever God leads. For our church, how can we join what God is doing, raising up a generation of passionate and courageous followers of God? It's a big question. And as I looked for the answer to those questions, from all that I've read about Jim's life and all that I've seen about Jim's life, so much of what was given to Jim and how he lived his life was passed down from two sources, one from his family, his biological family, and the other, his family church. Between those two things, like how he lived and how he was willing to lay down his life, were given to him by those two groups, the church and his family. And so I want to talk about those two things in this sermon series. So today I wanted to walk through 3 critical moments in the history of the family, because we are called to raise up a new generation of like radical followers of Jesus. I don't want us to be just like raise up a generation of like lukewarm Jesus followers. No, we're called to raise up a passionate generation of people who are willing to give it all and follow Jesus to the ends of the earth. So the first critical moment, so we're talking about 3 critical moments in the history of the family today. And the first critical moment in the history of the family came way back in the very beginning, before the birth of humanity. And if you could, you're going to have to use your imaginations for this part, okay? And just so you know, like as I'm talking today, so last Sunday, if you were here, I baptized 17, 18 people, and we went down in the water, and I pulled them up. And so I pulled a muscle right in the middle of my back right here. So if I look like I'm doing this, it's because I'm like right in the center of my back, there's this constant pain. I see the chiropractor again tomorrow, so anyway, be praying for me. So we're going to have to use our imaginations. And if I look stiff, it's just because I am. I'm so sorry. Use your imaginations. Imagine God speaking to the angels a long, long time ago in heaven, sharing with them something that's been on his heart and mind. Okay? And so God says, I have an idea. I'm going to speaking to the angels, I'm going to create the family. And the angels said, well, what is the family? What's that? And God says, the family's going to be a way I connect people together. Basically, it's going to look like this. Big people will sign up to care for little people that are strangers. Then the angel asks, are they going to get paid? And God says, no, actually, they're going to cost, that tiny little stranger is going to cost them a ton of money, more than they ever realized. And not only that, that tiny little stranger won't even be able to talk. All they're going to do is cry and scream and make messes all the time. They'll be utterly vulnerable. And they're going to have to watch that little baby 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're going to lose a ton of sleep. And when that baby is 2 years old, they're going to say words like no and mine. And they're going to throw temper tantrums in Stater Brothers. And then I'm thinking about inventing this thing called puberty. Odd things are going to happen in their bodies. They're going to get pimples. Their voice is going to crack. And at times they're going to begin to distance themselves from their parents. And just as they're mature and able to contribute, they're going to move away from the family, from mom and dad. That's my idea. What do you angels think? Now, could you imagine that moment? All the angels are like putting their heads down, shuffling their feet. They're saying, oh no, who's going to tell them? This is a really bad idea. Who's going to sign up for that? Who would ever? And so they kind of like, finally somebody says, Lord, I don't think anybody, who would sign up for that? Why would they do that? And that's where God gets really excited and he says, well, if that's the amazing part, they won't even know why. They're going to look down at those little hands and those little feet, and they're going to think that tiny little stranger is the most beautiful thing in the entire world, even though he or she looks exactly like Winston Churchill. Did you guys notice that? Like, when they're born, they all look like Winston Churchill. They're just different colors, but they all look like Winston Churchill. Actually, not too long ago, I was hugging one of your babies out there. I'm like, Winston, how are you? Like, but it's amazing. Okay, then one day, God says, one day that little stranger will smile, and I'm telling you, those parents are gonna think they won the lottery. They won't have words to describe it. And then one day they're gonna say, Mama and Dada. And then those little arms will pop up, and they're gonna reach out, and in that moment, they're gonna pick up the child, and that mom and dad, they're gonna melt inside like no other moment of their life. And in that moment, they're gonna experience a reality of my love and grace in their life in a way perhaps they never have before. Do you know that God had a dream of community and family? God had a dream of this thing called community and family. The whole idea of the family, the very heart of what the family was created to be and do, is an expression of God's character, love, and the grace of God. It's a reflection of who God is. You guys, the family is a divinely ordained idea. A divinely ordained idea. The family was created by God to be a reflection of his character, a manifestation of his kingdom on this earth, a vehicle of his grace. That's the family. There's never been an idea like it before. But then there's the second moment. The second critical moment is called the fall. When the first family chose to disobey God. We're going to be looking at Genesis 3. Beyond our relational connection with God, do you know what got marred and mangled and beat up the most in the fall? It was the family. Beyond our own personal relational connection with God as human beings, the next thing that got hit the hardest was the family. Here's Genesis 3:11. God said, "Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat from?" And the man said, "Yes, I did it. It's my responsibility. I'm so sorry." No, that's not what happened. No, the man said in Genesis 3:12, "The woman, you put me here on this earth. She gave me the fruit and I ate it." Guys, there's one other human being on the whole earth, the entire world, and the man blames her. And did you notice he doesn't even call her by name here? It's the woman. So my wife does this. She's like, "Your son, do you know what he did?" She won't say Judah or Creed, or she'll just say, "Your son." And she'll say, "It's your side of the family that comes from." That's what we do in families. We blame your son, your daughter. Imagine what happened later on when Eve was debriefing this moment with Adam. Imagine that moment. "Adam, I admire your courage in pointing out to God where it was my fault. I know I gave you the fruit, but I appreciate your honesty." That did not happen, just so you know. No, that was blame, deceit, cowardice, denial, unresolved conflict. It all begins in the garden. It all began right here. The second critical moment. And maybe to some degree you see your own family reflected in this. And we're just going to peruse the book of Genesis really fast here. If you've ever read through Genesis, one of the things that you're going to notice on central stage throughout the whole book of Genesis are not great armies or great nations, but families. That's like the highlight. If you read the book, it's all about families. But not just families. Deeply dysfunctional families all the way through Genesis. After Adam and Eve, we begin to read about Adam, like the Bible's first brothers, Cain and Abel. Apparently, they don't get along very well. Cain kills Abel. After Noah's son finds him disrobed in a drunken stupor, do you know what Noah does? He pronounces a formal curse on his son. And Noah is called the most righteous man of his generation, setting the bar very low. Abraham ends up having a child with his wife's servant and then abandons them both. Isaac and Rebekah spend their lives playing favorites with their two sons, Jacob and Esau. So Jacob, with the help of his mom, deceives his dad while cheating his brother out of his birthright. Then Esau spends the next 2 years trying to kill Jacob, who marries two women. But it turns out Jacob not only has children with his two wives, but also their two servants. 4 women! What? Jacob favors one of his sons so much, his youngest son Joseph, that his brothers want to kill him. And they end up selling Joseph into slavery. Now, I have a question for you. Does anybody feel better about your family yet? Yeah. These stories read like a bad episode of Jerry Springer, if you remember that show. It's bad, guys. And this is just the first book of the Bible. Can I just say, there's never been the golden age of the family? Think about that. There's never been the golden age of the family. Maybe the exception might be like Adam and Eve before the fall, right? There's never been the golden age of the family. It's through these strange, dysfunctional, messed up families that God is present and working to keep the dream of redemption and community alive. This is why here at our church we place such a high value not only on community, but on being an authentic community. Can I just talk about being an authentic community for a minute? This is so important. We're not just talking about community, we're talking about being authentic and real in our brokenness, realizing we are all a product of the fall. Okay? We gather together just as we are. And I want to encourage you, if you ever feel like I need to put on a mask when I go to church, I want to encourage you to rip that mask off and don't put it on anymore. Just be you in your brokenness, saying, God, would you heal up my heart and soul? But here's the deal. Most time, people don't want to take off their masks, and so we pretend to hide. And in that thing that says, I need to look good and be smart and pretend like I have my life all together, we're unable to open up our hearts and lives and let God heal us. But when we open ourselves up and take off the mask, all of a sudden God is able to hit our hearts and lives and change us and restore us and renew us. We gather together. No spiritual masks, no pretending, none of that stuff. For us, church is a place for regular people coming from regular families, all coming together to worship God, who welcomes us and embraces us in the middle of our weaknesses. And think about that. So often we think, well, as soon as I'm good and have things right, then I can. No, that's backwards. We come to church to get healed and restored and let God work in our lives, and the movement of the Spirit comes and restores us. And then we get to, we don't have to wear this mask and pretend that we're somebody that we're not. And God heals us up and restores us as we follow him. And we're going to talk about that word follow in just a minute. Pierre, I worked with Pierre in Haiti for years. Pierre, he was educated in the States. He's from Haiti originally. And Pierre did his college in the States. He moved back to Haiti, and he started showing the Jesus movie all over Haiti. And as he shows this Jesus movie, there had a lot of Haitian men and women that were finding Christ, giving their lives over to the Lordship of Jesus. And they would stop sacrificing chickens in the evening, and they would say, I'm going to worship Jesus, and now I'm not going to do that anymore. There's a lot of voodoo and all kinds of other stuff in Haiti. And so one day I was talking to Pierre, and I'm like, how did you plant your church? And he's like, well, it's really simple, because I showed this Jesus video in this village, and a woman came and she gave her life to Jesus. And he was encouraging everybody that got saved to go back into their village and join a local church. And so they were all doing this, and this one lady that had a shady past, she gave her life to Jesus, and Pierre said, now go find a church in your home village. And she went back to her own village, and the local pastor said, well, you can't be a part of our church. You would ruin our reputation. So you can't be a part of us. And so she told this to Pierre, and Pierre's like, we'll find the next church. So she actually had to like walk a mile to the next church. And this pastor said the same thing. You can't be a part of our church. You have a bad reputation. So she told this to Pierre, and Pierre's like, well, I'm planting a church with all these broken people. Because that's all that there are in the church. People that are broken, moving towards healing and restoration. That's redemption. That's like God restoring us and renewing us. If you carry any anxiety about being part of the church, can you let it go? Like once and for all, let it go. We are all broken, moving towards Jesus. At this church, we believe that faith is a journey, not a destination. Faith is a journey to know God more. Jesus said this, he said, follow me, actually 22 times in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, in the Gospels. He would spit this out all the time, just follow me. Follow me. And Jesus' call is the same today, follow me. Do you know that following is a journey? It's not about destination, it's about following is a journey. We're all on this journey together. And that while we may all be in different places along that journey, as long as we're all moving towards Jesus, man, what a beautiful community that is. Where we don't have to wear masks, where we're following Jesus, where we're learning to lay down ourselves, become less selfish, and move towards the cross together. What a beautiful, dynamic community that is. Now, that's not to say we simply excuse sinful behavior, because we don't. But we choose instead to have the kind of community that makes it safe for someone to admit their struggles, so they can begin the really hard work of healing and moving forward in their lives. So this is the first great critical moment in the history of the family was the birth of God's family. Then came the horrible moment when fear, pain, shame, deceit, and betrayal entered the human race. So you should be saying, John, is there any hope? Is there hope? Well, there is, and hope has a name. Jesus. Hope has a name, Jesus. God came down to earth, and he experienced many of the same struggles you've experienced being part of a family. That's true, and I'm going to show you. He experienced many of the struggles that you've experienced in your own family growing up. Even when he began his public ministry, his family was not always there cheering him on. At the end, at the cross, his mother was there. But let me tell you, there was a good amount of time during Jesus' ministry when he was on earth where the family was like, no way, Jesus. We're staying away. And I want to share one of those stories with you. Jesus' family, they see how he's hanging out with sinners, spending time with the unclean. He's offending the whole religious system, the religious elite that held power in what we call the synagogue, the church back then. Jesus is doing things, and all of a sudden he's getting this little reputation. And then we read in Mark chapter 3, verse 21, we read this. When his family, Jesus' brothers and his mother at this point, when his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said he's out of his mind. Jesus' family is saying Jesus is out of his mind. What's he doing hanging out with broken sinners and the unclean? What's he doing in the world? Are you kidding me? Now, let's look at the little phrase. They wanted to take charge of him. How do you think that's going to go? Now, I want you to know the Greek word here used by Mark is the same. He used it 3 other times in the Gospel of Mark. The first time was when they talk about Herod's arrest of John the Baptist. The word arrest is that same take charge of him. The second time it's used is the chief priest's desire to arrest Jesus. And the third time is Jesus' arrest how they arrested him in Gethsemane. So when they say that they go to take charge of him, they're talking about like arresting Jesus, like pulling him out of where he's ministering right now. Maybe they're concerned for his safety. Maybe they're concerned for the family's reputation. But here's what let's get him home, get him out of the public eye, and let's do an intervention. That was their intention with Jesus. That's their intention. Let's take charge of him. So they go to the house where Jesus is ministering, and they send somebody in to tell him what's going on, and they're waiting outside for Jesus, his family, his mother and brothers. But when this messenger lets Jesus know what's going on, Jesus responds in Mark 3:33. He responds like this: "Who are my mother and brothers?" he asks. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother, my sister, my mother." And guess what Jesus just did here? He just redefined family. Just redefined family. A new family, a spiritual family. And this is the third critical moment in the history of the family. Jesus is saying, anybody who follows me, whoever would follow me, they're part of my family. And guess what? They're going to be brothers and sisters. Whole new family is birthed 2,000 years ago with Jesus. God's family is not bound together the way we'd understand a family or group to ever be bound together. It's not by birth, not by family lineage, not by church affiliation, not by social credentials, not by educational training, not by approval of the religious elite and the Pharisees, Sadducees, and what they think should be a grouping together. No, Jesus' family is marked by those who hear what Jesus says to do and then doing that thing. It's all who want to follow Jesus. Follow Jesus. That's his new family. This family is more than a spiritual family. This new family is tied together with love and commitment to one another in a surreal way. Because there's never been a family like this before that transcended status and gender and background and nationality and age and skin color and culture. This is a new family. And it was, just so you know how absolutely bizarre it was for Jesus to make this statement here, it was unheard of in all the ancient world to put faith above your biological ties. It's unheard of. There's no other example like this in history. Jesus is the first example of saying, no. Whoever does the will of God is my mother, my sister, my brother. He just redefined his family. And this new community, Jesus says in John 15:12, love one another as I have loved you. Serve one another as I have served you. Care for one another as I've cared for you. Be generous with one another the way I've been generous to you. Forgive one another as I've forgiven you. Like Jesus calls us to this beautiful new family community that changes everything. So 15 years ago, Kate and I went to go see the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if you haven't ever seen them before, they're just amazing. And that's kind of like, I love that stuff. So I took Kate with me, my wife, but I also took Haven, my third daughter, with me. And she was 1 year old at this point. And I put her in one of those Kelty Kids backpacks. So like a backpacking backpack that holds a kid that's just a hair over a year old, and you'd hike with them on your back. Well, I took that with me, and because I was on kid duty that day, and I'm like, I'm going to see the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I go in, and I know it's this big black room with glass cases everywhere. And this backpack it was like went out like this far off my back. And so Kate was like, Haven's not like exactly the most behaving right now. She's kicking. She's doing what 1 year olds do when they want to get out of the backpack and go like crawl around or walk around. And so there I am seeing these earliest manuscripts. If you haven't seen the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's 2 full books of the book of Isaiah, like some of the earliest manuscripts we have. There's also fragments of every other book in the Bible. And so I was like, I'm just in awe seeing this stuff, right? Like, but Haven's on my back. And as I'm going in Kate's like, John, I don't think you should come in here with the backpack and Haven because you're kind of clumsy with that thing on your back. And I'm like, no, I'm fine, I'm good. And so I'm like walking around, and there's glass cases on both sides, and I'm like, I'm little, but I'm like trying to squeeze between in this big backpack on my back. So I'm like looking at the things, and Kate's like, if you destroy something, I'm taking out of your allowance for the next 100 years. I'm like, I'll be fine, no worries. And I told her I'd be fine. Well, I get all the way around the first corner, and I turn, and I hear this scraping on the glass case from this metal bar that lost the rubber stopper on the bottom, and it went, and it scraped a section of glass about this long. And I'm like looking at the security guards, and they look at me, and I'm like, and then, so finally I get 3/4 way through, and I turn around again. This is so embarrassing. I don't know why I tell you these stories. I turn around again, and the backpack hits this sign that said, shh. The sign that says shh falls onto the ground. The corner of this plexiglass breaks off, and I'm like going to try to fix it. Like, you have to bend down like this, and like the security guards are like, come and get it, and they're like, it's okay. And then they're kind of like, they give this motion like, maybe you should go out. Anyway, here's my point. My point is, each and every day that you and I walk in this world, and sometimes we're clumsy and we bump into people and we're forgetful and we don't notice, what we're brushing up against are some objects of incalculable worth. Incalculable worth from God's perspective. People your brothers and sisters are next to you, and sometimes we just brush by people. We don't notice these people that have incalculable worth in God's eyes. And actually, after I was there, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I'm like walking by these people, and God views them in such a way, help my heart match, because we are a family. We are a family. We're walking by people with incalculable worth. And I really felt like the Holy Spirit just say, like, I care more for that person. They're more valuable than all the Dead Sea Scrolls altogether, like that one person. And I was like, God, help me see my brothers and sisters. Help me see your church in this way. Every person has incalculable worth that we so often fail to see. So let's show our friends and coworkers, neighbors, relatives, not just what we know, our biblical knowledge, but who we love. And let's show them their incalculable worth in the world today. As a family, as imperfect as we might be, let's lead them into authentic community and authentic worship, where we're learning to follow Jesus together, where we're laying down ourselves and choosing to follow God and follow His way, even in spite of all of our issues. Let's together instill the kind of courage and passion, that the kind of infatuation with the kingdom of God that gripped Jim Elliot's life, so that all other allegiances pale in comparison to following Jesus. Let's do that together as a community, as God's church, as a family, as family matters more than you would ever realize. Family matters a whole lot more than you will ever realize. So we have 3 calls to action today. Here's the first one. Let's be authentic people. And I want to encourage you, if you thought about church as that place where you have to wear a mask, can I just say, I give you permission to take off the mask and it be a little messy, and be the raw, broken, real you moving towards Jesus. And as we're all doing that together, it's a beautiful, beautiful picture of God's intention for the church. Now, we're not going to take off our masks and turn around and look away from the cross. No, we're going to be moving towards Jesus. And as we all do that together, it is so dynamic what happens to us. So let's be an authentic people. No spiritual masks, no pretending, just honest connection and conversation as we journey together towards Jesus. Okay, number 2, it's time to buck up and treat our church family like we belong together, because we do. We are a family. We're a family. And actually, just so you know, I appreciate the third critical moment of the family, like how we are a new family. And that's not to discount my biological family, my family of origin. It's not to discount that. It's not even to discount my family with my kids. But we're a family. And when we can think of ourselves as a family, it changes us. Both Kate and I are from the Midwest. And guess what? When you don't have any family around, you realize how important this thing called the church is, where you rely on one another like a family. We need each other. So, forgive, extend grace, go to each other when you feel wronged. We're going to be dealing with some of this stuff that was marred at the fall in this series. We're going to be tackling some of this stuff. And be an expression of extravagant love for one another. And number 3, the church should be the best place to work through life's problems, find healing, reconciliation, forgiveness, deep friendship, and connection. The church should be the best place, guys. It starts with each of us going first, though. So invite somebody over to your house or to coffee. Be the first to share your heartache or joy. Be the first to apologize or make things right. Be the first one to be brave and pray for somebody. Little actions turn us into family. So let's be family. Now, some of you are like, well, my family's from Southern California, John, no problem. I see them every weekend. And others of you have no family here at all. But let's be a family together. Let's treat each other. Let's realize there's incalculable worth. When you're walking through that courtyard afterwards, there's incalculable worth that God has for every single one of us. And if we could just acknowledge that and actually start to see each other, man, what God will do with a church that's family, that take Him seriously, where we are a new family together. Could you guys stand with me? We're going to sing this song. It's kind of like a fun, upbeat song. But let this song be our prayer today. And as we're singing this song, we have 2 songs. Can you just ask yourself what the Holy Spirit might be saying to you about this thing called family and connection and relationships? Like, what is your take home today? Ask the Holy Spirit. I believe God will direct you on what your take home is